I'm going to share screen right from the beginning and let us see where we get it from here.
Perfect.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a topic, as I've said, that haunted me this whole week and before even. I was thinking about this thing about why community development fails sometimes. And I was thinking about around that topic in the broad spectrum. But before I start, because this is going to link up with the discussion in the way I'm going to approach it. But as starters, being also a South African, I want to ask Joanna, please unmute yourself and just give us the reason why, how did it come that you are so interested, or that you are interested in community development? Why this topic in your life? Joanna, would you please help us out on that one?
Thank you very much, Edivet. My interest in community development is because I'm born and bred on a farm, and both our parents were community development practitioners in their own right. We did everything on the farm. We used the resources that we had. I attended school on a donkey cart. Because my father was a wagon maker, so he made that all the resources that we had, we used. And for my father, he always preached that you have to use what you have, and education is very, very important, and you have to work hard to be what you want to be, despite the environment from which you come from. Having lectured health promotion at UCT, I found that the way from the health perspective, and as a health promotion practitioner, that the way we educate or we render educational awareness campaigns are often from our own theoretical background or what we learn from the textbooks, instead of designing interventions that actually address the people's experiences and what they can do. If you link that health promotion definition to take control of the social determinants of health. After all, if we talk about community development, we talk health. You should be healthy in order to do things for yourself. So it really integrates well with the definition of health, because it's not just about illness, but it's about the broader social issues. Maybe
Thanks for sharing that. But I hear the positive inclination there, and that is sort of deeply ingrained. But Bob Rhodes, you're on a different planet when it comes to what Shannon was talking about. Let me hear from your side. Where did it originate in your life?
Well, I guess it originates in the sense of, in the UK, we've had an experience which I think we've talked about in other webinars, which has been, I guess, around the fact that government is always authoritarian to one extent or another, and in reality, we've experienced over the last 30 to 40 years a movement to greater centralization, greater authoritarianism, a greater, a lesser appreciation of the fact that as human beings, we're people that actually flourish by cooperation. And essentially, I grew up in a social work, community work environment where the assumption immediately after the formation of the welfare state was that the most effective way of actually caring for each other was nurturing community, and that's been replaced by an environment which basically, or a sort of day-to-day governmental hegemony, which basically says that the way in which we get good lives is through the consumption of services and consumption of products. And it doesn't work in our society. My day-to-day work is around a society that is collapsing in the context of how we care for each other, and how we look out for each other, and how we care for our environment, and how we care for our communities. And so increasingly, getting people back together to recognize their talents, their gifts, getting people to actually want to take control of things and not be servants to or basically just dumb consumers of that system. It's sort of fundamental to day-to-day work.
I like the difference in the first world and the developing and underdeveloped world, African context here. I also like to get Yu Cheng involved. You are from China, I think, or where is it? Yu Cheng, can you hear me?
Hong Kong.
Yes.
Yes, let me hear. Yeah. Go for it. What triggers your interest? Why community development? Let me hear.
Actually, that's first of all, that's my background. I'm a social worker, and because I see that there's some structural inequality in the community, because there's some disadvantaged people. They suffer a lot. They face some opaque situation. So that's also because my background. I engage with them and talk with them, try to work with them. So that's the beginning of my background, that I engage some disadvantaged groups. So I try to explore and find some way to make change. So the first, I really think that community work or community development is kind of an approach to try to deal with this situation. So and I see that when I engage with them and then try to organize some of them, try to work with them, then especially I think when I was working at the front line, I tried to do some policy advocacy work. And I see in the process the committee members, they have their goals, they kind of have their critical reflection, and then the policy change is also important in this way. So I see that this approach is really important, especially in Hong Kong. But you may know that the situation now in Hong Kong is we always find maybe some alternative ways, try to engage community members again and try to rebuild the civil society. So so that's the topic really interesting to me, that I think in our part of the world, we still explore how to do community development, and also try to advocate something or rebuild the civil society. So yeah, that's our situation. So yeah, that's a very really important approach for us to uphold in terms of values, also some practical experience. Yeah. So
thank you very much for sharing that. Thanks for that. Ladies and gentlemen, what I detect from what I've just heard is that it seems to be we are on different stages of the pendulum when it comes to community development. In some cases, we are reviving it. Communities want to re-own their property, their well-being. On the other side of the spectrum, we want to achieve that. It's not a re-own, but a first own sort of. So it's very interesting that in this world of these extremes and of everything that we were talking about, community development is starting to filter out to become a discipline on its own. It is so important, and it makes it so difficult for us to be scientists in this changing world. I would like to see, or I personally see, community development as one of the youngest science-focused science areas that we are currently dealing with. And I'm talking interdisciplinary now. Obviously, there are other also, but it's one of the very latest that we try to get order in. I just want to ask ourselves why this negative unmute. Sorry, I could hear me. Why this negative approach? Why are we there? Why are we asking what does not work? And I want to take you through an attitude change towards community development, and we're going to work through that shortly and see where it takes us. To take you back to science, and I'm pretty much interested in the scientific side of community development, the theoretical side of that, getting some order in the house. And you will find that as we move on, how this critical thinking is trying to model the way I see community development as a subject. But when we start from the sciences, it is one of the basic criteria that we deal with as scientists is this possibility of falsification. Not all topics, not all statements are scientific. The point is, some of it is very logic, but you cannot have make a scientific statement or have a science on a topic if it cannot be falsified. And this is so important. That triggered me with community development. We've just heard from colleagues now around the table of this very positive approach towards life, towards fellow human beings, personal experiences, how we grew up. May I say it, I think community development practitioners and interested fraternity is a special breed of human animals. I think we are a special breed. We make interesting discussions, but also a lot of enemies around the dinner table, sometimes with a long beer in the hand, because of the way we see life. So, ladies and gentlemen, how can you say something is right if you cannot prove it wrong? And that is the essence of when we talk about community development. I've experienced that with a lot of master's students and doctoral students when I give them study guidance. They come to me and say, Professor, my hypotheses were proven wrong. And then my question is, so? Then we know that. And they tend to interpret it as being a failure. And that is why I say there's another 50%, and we must watch the figures when I change my figures. There's another 50% of knowledge that we tend to ignore if it doesn't go my line, if it doesn't support my line. And that is why we shy away from the bad news. But it's so important because it could fill a gap of understanding a lot more about the sciences. We tend to miss out on this 50% of information. When I talk about myself, and you could see my figure change, I'm talking about the other 100%. The scientific tradition is that we see, and we always look at both sides of the sciences. To advance community development as a discipline, that means we must not only look at the good news, we must also investigate the bad news. And when I talk about for myself now, when I, as a practitioner, community development practitioner, when I sell my so-called expertise to potential clients, I tend to tell them how good I am, how good the techniques are that I use, and how successful I was in the past. That's natural. That's marketing. I will not tell them about my failures. I'm not going to get a job then. I'm not going to sell my abilities. And I call that ignorance. And then I speak to myself. And we have to look at the other side of the coin also. And I call that the other 100%. So our problem is that community development are primarily good news stories. We are sort of tuned into that. That is our inclination, our default. And when we have a bad news story, we put it in the side drawer. We think, okay, bad news, let's recover and go on. And the problem about that is that in general, we are sort of conditioned to lack this critical thinking about our own work and about community development in general. We're missing out on information. We're all aware of these slogans that run around about community development. Now, I'm going to show you some of them, and I might open up a can of worms, but let us see where it takes us. Some of these slogans are, the community knows best, or community must decide. It's so deeply ingrained in our work. It's true. But why would the community be in this state of despair if they knew best? So we have to look at it from a different angle also. Sounds nice on the ear. Let the people speak. Bottom-up approach, grassroots development approach. How nice is that? But then we go to communities and we have held meetings with community leaders, all the people around the table that are important in the gatekeepers in the community. And we don't speak to Joe Soap. We don't speak to the herder, cow herder out on the slopes. So the problem is that why would you think a community leader is a community leader? To some extent, it is because he's got a bee in his bonnet. It sells well. He's got something that he puts forward, especially political leaders are prone to that. They have a theme. And if you don't touch onto that theme, you will probably not be successful in getting their support. That is not bottom-up. That's his idea that would foster the greatest support around him. It's better to do something than to do nothing. That I've heard so many times. For the better, at least let's do something. It's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We can do the right thing in community development too early. It is just as wrong as doing the right thing too late. It's wrong. A community development practitioner is in essence a timing artist. You do the right thing at the right time. You do it too early, later the community is going to tell you, we've tried that in the past. You do it too late, they tell you, we don't need that anymore. We are timing artists. Give a man a fish and feed him for a day, teach him how to fish. That's true. But that's only true for the labor. There's more to labor and know-how to make a living in a community. We need to give access to resources, social networks, support various institutions in the community, etc. This networking, this capacity building and empowerment, it's not only empowerment, it's capacity building also of this community. But it sounds nice on the ear. And if you've run out of slogans, ladies and gentlemen, and this is my experience, when I sell my work to clients, I tell them it's going to be holistic development. How nice can it be? You can't default that at all. That's the trump card. I'm talking about cards, not politics. That's the trump card. Holistic development. You know, the problem with holistic development is because nobody knows what it really means. And if I ask anybody, every one of you around the table, what is holistic, and you're all going to add something else and something else and something else. That's why my definition of holistic development is N+1. Anything you could think of plus something else. So it doesn't take us far when it comes to science. I mean, holistic development in education is the same, is in the same conundrum. It's something very nice, but we really don't know what it actually means. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, Thompson, from a project management, and sorry for this reading, a lot of reading there, but Thompson from the Project Management Institute, World Bank, he sort of, to my mind, saw the light at some stage in one of his publications. At the later stage, he changed courses a little bit. But he says that it's been very often the case that projects is from a project management perspective, designed backwards, supply driven. You have a project, you persuade your beneficiaries to accept it. And then he says, goes further, introducing the demand driven client-centered project design has been a puzzle for most development agencies all over the world. I've got a product. I'm going to sell it to you in the rural area. And to a certain extent, without saying it, I say to you, take it or leave it. I'm not going to change my product. This is what I offer to you. So now he says that they are in a conundrum. The World Bank is now requiring the use of project management methodology in new proposals, but hasn't figured out how to train the borrowers. You hear the problem there? We must train the borrowers to fit our product. We must train the client or the community to fit what I have to offer. It's all wrong. There's a very interesting article, very short, by Gupta, which touches with onto some of the issues most of us are probably familiar with. There's this failed project. They evaluated failed projects, the Turkana fish factory in Kenya. It sort of started off, it was a Norwegian company that wanted to do this. But the problem with this Turkana fish factory was that the people around Lake Turkana didn't eat fish. And so they wanted to export it. It was the food for the very, very poor, the down and out people. They used the fish, ate fish. And this cultural thing was a problem for this project. So they thought of exporting it. It was so far and remote that the infrastructure wasn't available. and they had to rely on generators for power, and transport. The roads was a problem. It was a total disaster. They didn't do the spade work, the footwork for this. Play pumps is another one. The second picture on the left there, where it was meant, this novel idea, and it was designed around students or people don't have play pumps, children don't have playgrounds in the rural areas. Now, it makes all sense in the urban environment where children have to play on a playground in the middle of the city. It's different in the rural areas of Africa. People play everywhere. It's a total different inclination. Millennium Villages projects was aimed at various countries in Africa. The Gyandu program in India was about internet connection and bringing cell phones to people. The infrastructure was just not good enough for it to be successful. And then there's this 1 million t-shirts originated in America. And that project not even started. It was a good idea, novel idea. We're gonna collect 1 million t-shirts, listen to the words, and donate it and send it to Africa. It didn't even got off the ground at the end, because t-shirts is not the preferred dress in Africa. And at that stage, it was aborted very early, this whole project. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, and this is Gupta's conclusion, that failures aren't always a bad thing. They are opportunities to learn. However, these examples show that before large monetary commitments can be made, they need to be trialed, tested in collaboration with the target community. And that basically says it all. It says it all, that we have to start at a different place. That we know. But we have to go to seeing the failures. This starting at the beginning at the right place comes in different shades. And these different shades are failures, which we have to look at. And in my preparation for this presentation, I came across this brilliant study of Omunu. It's a master's thesis of a failed project, and he dissected it. And I thought, wow, what a great piece of work. And it seems to be only in the thesis. It should have been much more available, the information we have. This Plan International is a company that carries out community managed projects, of community-based managed projects in Ghana, and that's the one he evaluated. And it focused on animal rearing, school construction, tree planting, and multiplication of improved seeds. That was the project, novel project that they had to do. He had to work through this. He went through the results. His thesis examined the challenges that prevent community participation and undermine sustainability and ownership. And let's quickly browse through what he found. Failure reason 1, levels of income. And I never thought of it that way. Most of the community members are preoccupied with efforts to look for money, and that was in rural area, Africa. Money for survival, rather than put their efforts into projects, put money into projects that would have long-term benefits. We must know what is the window period of money in a community. How long is it going to last? What is it used for? And this project was specifically designed. They must make a contribution. What contribution? From what money? What they get from where? But the idea was it would give you interest. It would stimulate your interest. It would keep you going. It would commit you because you committed money into this project. And that didn't fly. It didn't work in this community of the very poor and the destitute to say, I have extra money to take for the project, to make available for a project. Available reason too, mobilization of locally available resources. Plan was, as an institution, dictated the mandatory process of methods to mobilize and access resources. They prescribed how people would be recruited in the community and which people. And the communities were not taken through this rationale. And the process and its intention to nurture sustainability wasn't understood from the community side. These strict rules and regulations and novel ideas of how it's going to foster partnership didn't fly. Peer pressure. And it was found by this Umunu that a lot of decisions in the rural areas, especially in the disadvantaged communities, are made with peers. It's a group effort. It's not an individual. What this project did is got people, individuals involved, and in the process, the friendship circles were cut, or the links with the friendship circles were cut. Peer groups provided support, advice, and guidance to each other, making decisions and feel a sense of communal responsibility to participate in the projects. It seems to be, according to Umunu, that this project was run in such a way that it neglected, maybe ignored, the influence of peer influence in decision-making. Reason number 4 for the failure, staff attitude. They did what was right. You must know it. We have procedures and bureaucratic systems in place to combat fraud, maladministration, etc., because the money is donated, which is donated should be managed properly. Good project management, responsible people. But as one community project facilitator expressed it, how depressing it is to administer the project as the finance department always insists on conventional accounting procedures of plan, which are very hard to meet by the communities. So we're talking about a disparity. We're not on the same page. We want to do the same thing, but in the process, we're hampered community development and the participation of the people. It was an unintended consequence. And then there's this thing that he discovered about education level of participants. People not going through formal education find it very difficult to get involved in formal, structured projects. They have to hide their illiteracy. Such things as a report writing, receipts, signatures, they cannot write. Formal contracts becomes a disaster. As one person so correctly said, you know, for people like me who have not gone very far in education, far in books, when you insist that we present receipts, present filled accountability forms and reports, the only way out is to look for a way to forge them and give you what you want. Unintended consequences of good intentions. And then there was another reason he picked up for failed project identification and ownership. Now, yes, we know it is bottom up. The community knows best. We know that. But most participants gave the impression that the projects are owned by Plan. It's their projects. And they refer to it as planned projects, not our project. So it seems to be it found that the enthusiasm and motivation that the communities had at the beginning appeared to fade during the process at later stages because the owners of the project, community managed project, that was the intention, was not us. They came across too strong, too strict, too distant in that sense for the participation of the broader community. And look at this. Very interesting that we should take note of. We should factor that in our consideration when we deal with community development projects in general, but especially in the African environment, in the rural African environment. Smaller percentages of women participated in the projects, which could have had a negative effect community on the ownership of these projects. And the reason being that some cultures do not permit women to oppose decisions made by their male counterparts. Even worse, women's roles may remain invisible or unrecognized when a dominant main consensus prevails. This thing of consensus driven. And then it seems to be the general practice is that the woman would be silent. They have a view, but it doesn't come to the fore. Community development projects, especially in this African rural environment, we have to learn from the mistakes in this respect. And we need an extra effort to go there. And maybe, Bob, even in the first world environment, it might still be the case. I'm very interested to hear your comment on that. But then there would be the age differences. Some projects intended for the elderly were dominated by the youth. Why? Because they are so concerned. Actually, the middle age and lower age, they're so concerned about their elder relatives, and that they started to join the project aimed at the adults. And that compromised the accountability. They wouldn't take accountability for the sustainability because it's elderly focused. And the vice versa also happened. When the projects were aimed at the youth, the younger parents came to the projects and came to the party to assist this youth because they are so interested in the youth. Yes, we did get numbers in the project, but of the wrong age. And it didn't have a long-lasting effect on the sustainability of the projects. And I think this is the last one that he brought up in this study, is that community leaders serve as gateways. And it seems to be especially, and Bob also referred to that in the British environment and in the phase we are in, where community leaders, politicians in that case, they are the people that would allow you, especially in rural Africa, allow you into the community. You won't be able to go in there if they don't give their consent. You could have whatever reason to say, but I'm going to bypass them. You could do that. It's not going to fly. Some of these committee members stated that local leaders were not involved in identified projects. In fact, the local people even commented and saying that the project that plan introduced were not the priority for the Joseph, the community, the ordinary human being in the rural areas. It was something different at that stage. Remember, I said at the beginning, the community development practitioner is a timing artist. So for my last slide, community development, what goes wrong and why? In this study, his conclusion was the inception of the project, the problems should be identified by the community themselves and with very limited influence from project management. That is a crucial issue. Very limited influence from project management. And very few international agencies and assistance is open for that. So in essence, if that is not the case, the project will always be demand-driven rather than supply-driven. And we have to look into that in a very critical way. Why did the community development projects fail? Good intentions, a lot of money, logic thinking, probably because we as community development practitioners did not do what we have to do, be part of the gateway to real community development projects. The instrument, the people that should sit around the table with the big guys to say, whoa, whoa, just hold your horses a little bit. What are we dealing with? Let's start with looking at the target population. There was a book written, I couldn't lay my hands on it anymore. And I've tried to look on the internet for that book, but I have it in my file here. The key question that should resonate in the mind of every community development practitioner throughout every development project, throughout, is whose development? And I think that should resonate with everybody else, every one of us. That is the critical thinking we need. That is, may I call it, the other 100% information. We so often neglect what went wrong. Whose development were we talking about? And all the elements that blended into this conclusion, the project is a failure. Why? Science sees that as the other 100% of the information. We as community development practitioners are so positively inclined, so altruistic, and we often neglect the bad news. I think we must change our attitude. It's not bad news. It's good news. It's good news for then we can say, now we know that. The wrong is we hide it. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the floor is open for discussion.
Thank you so much, Devet. Wow, as I said before, we need the whole day to have a discussion that would do credit and yes, but I think, sure, so many things to think about. Immediately while you were talking, I was thinking about Ernesto Ciroli, and I've put the link for his YouTube talk called Shut Up and Listen. And I think that is such an important thing, like you say, from the beginning, you shouldn't even be almost visible. You know, you should be, you shouldn't be for people to say that's Janine's project in KZN, or that's Devet's project in Cape Town, or that's Bob's project in England. The practitioner has to be almost invisible. And I always say to people in training sessions, that's the challenge that we have, is to be trying to motivate and perhaps lead and perhaps guide, but always stepping backwards. And I think that is one of the most difficult things, because as you say, as practitioners in community development, our heart is there, our compassion is there, our passion, we want to get things done. We feel like perhaps we've got the answers, and it's constantly having to hold yourself back and let the community come forward with the decisions, with the answers. As Ernesto says in that YouTube talk, you have to follow the passion of the local people. They need to work with something that they are passionate about. And if you think of it for yourself, if someone comes and tells me to get involved in something that I have no interest in or no passion for, I'm not going to put any effort into that. It's got to be something that that community or those people are passionate about. And I'm sure all of us have learned hard lessons of trying to impose a project on somebody or on a group of people, and then it fails. And it's exactly for that reason, as Devet says, it's because we've jumped in too much from the beginning. So that was the one key thing that I thought of. And as I say, I've shared that YouTube. But also a very interesting thing that I saw the other day is the idea of Ringo, reinvesting in the NGO sector, it's like a reversal. So instead of NGOs on the ground or organizations having to apply to funders for funding, these guys are trying a reversal where they say the funders have to come forward and apply to the organizations on the ground and say, please, can I be your funder? And so the organization on the ground comes forward like a dragon's den, I suppose, puts forward their project and says, this is what we're doing. This is what our community is interested in. You can apply to come and be one of our investors and funders. And I just thought that is, I mean, imagine if the whole nonprofit civil society thing could change to that way of doing things. It would be mind-blowing, because so much of the time we are trying to chase the funder. We're trying to chase their objectives and their goals and their current trends of, now we must focus on climate change. So everyone has to tweak their vision statements and stuff to fit in with them so that we can access their funding. And I think that just blew my mind. I thought, wow, imagine if we could do something like that. That would be so incredible. And then I think it brings in that whole idea of co-designing, collaborating, all those co-words, co-powerment, working with the community, making sure that they are part of the process from the very beginning, not afterwards when you've come in and said, right, here's a project design, would you like to get involved? It's from the beginning. Whose process is it anyway? Whose development is it? As that powerful final question that Devet ended on. So those are my thoughts, but I see Roger's hand is up. Roger, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Could I thank you for an excellent presentation? It was a really insightful, critical analysis, and I thank you for that. I'm coming at this issue from a urban community sociologist perspective, but also as a community activist, and the latter more than the former. I work in London, UK, and spend a lot of my time working with communities who ask me to work with them, rather than I think I should work with a specific community. Most of, if not all, the work I do is working with community campaigns against housing redevelopment, regeneration, issues around gentrification. And so you just said, Chair, it's essentially co-design. It's their ideas, their thoughts, their needs, their questions, and all I do is listen and help orchestrate that with them into challenging, for example, a global developer, a local authority or council who wishes to demolish thousands of social rented homes to build expensive high-rise flats for outsiders who can afford it, and so on and so on. But essentially for me, and I think this is where the presentation made a lot of impact on me, was that we actually, I mean, I'm not a community development person. I'm a community activist who works with communities, but I take the view that, as the presentation was, it's about taking sides. I take sides. I cannot have some neutral position, and in doing so, obviously one lays oneself open to criticism, attacks. Why are you taking sides? Well, because I'm working with a community who's asked me to come in. So some of the work I did with the Grenfell fire, the horrible fire in London a few years back, was because I was asked to be involved. Simple as that. I wanted to be involved, but hey, I wasn't asked until someone said, Roger, come along and just listen and see if you can add a few ideas, and that's it. So,
but Roger, you are on the side of the community. If you take a side,
yes,
it would be the side of the community against the system, and that is what Bob also was talking about.
indeed, yes, indeed, yes.
It seems to be that I call it the hidden hand of the system. The system, as societies becomes more sophisticated and more developed, there's this hidden hand of a system that sort of bars away the community for their inputs, and I think you are trying to restore that input into the system, which is somewhere missing along the line.
Yes, I mean, communities need a voice. And if you look at urban development across all the cities across planet Earth, whether it's Nairobi in Kenya, whether it's Hong Kong, in Berlin, wherever, I've seen this in Mumbai, etc., etc. There are redevelopments where the community is seen as collateral damage. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, your hand is up.
Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful, but I guess from a Lives Through Friends perspective, our network, everything is action research. Everything that we're involved with is learning. And I think most of the learning we do is getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm not certain how much of this is transferable to other areas. Our area is around disability, mental health, social services. Effectively, it's about how we care for each other throughout our lives. Our issue is what we've learned over time is that it doesn't matter if we're dealing with if you like, class issues. The starting position is always the individual. And the individual within their family, within their social network, if they've got one. So many of the people we end up starting with don't really have that much social capital or relationship network. And so essentially, we're starting off on every piece of work we do in terms of helping people establish what their best life in their circumstances could be. And then we're connecting people who have the similar issues into a wider group, into a community, and so on. Now, as I say, that works for us, but how translatable that is into other areas of community development work, other people would need to make their own judgment.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I think that's very useful. And I often say I don't like the term best practice because it could be best practice for Bob, but if DeWet just takes it like that and tries to implement it, it's a disaster. So I never like people. I mean, I never like the idea of saying, well, this is best practice, you need to copy it, because each community is unique and different.
Yes, to a certain extent, every project is sort of an element of reinvention of the wheel. What works in this community doesn't work in that community, and we've seen it in the discussion at the beginning. But even in rural Africa, you go from one area to another area. This one is going to fly, it's not going to fly there. But we have to be sensitive for that. And that means very critical for our own priorities, our own abilities, our own preferences, and our own skills. That's so important. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Johanna, your hand is up, and I was going to read out your question. So I don't know if you're wanting to do that one or something else, but I see that in the chat you were asking, how can we address the issue of power, culture, and ethics in community development? But over to you, Johanna.
Thank you very much. This was a very, very thought-provoking presentation. And first, I wanted to ask about the issue of power, culture, and ethics in community development. And as you presented, this presentation reminded me of issues of decolonization, where really, for example, when I did research, my research proposal was just what I had written, what I wanted to do to satisfy the ethics committee. And when I went in the field, things changed. The consent forms that I had were not translated by the professional translator that the ethics committee wanted. Instead, it was translated in academic isiXhosa.
Sure.
And my field researchers actually said, this language is not spoken here. So the question was now, who should really develop the consent information leaflets when we do research or when we prepare for consent in the research process? So really, this is a thought-provoking presentation. It brings a lot of thinking around how we do things. I mean, when I read Chilisa, who wrote a lot about decolonizing research methods, that questions must come from communities where you want to do development or where you want to do research. They must actually design everything, not me coming with my own questions. So that's why I'm saying there are issues of power, really, maybe hidden power within the way we practice or within the way we do research, the way we do community practice. Even as a health promotion practitioner, I myself, the way I even do health promotion, because there are power issues that we need to address. There are also cultural issues. I did write about indigenous knowledge, which is often dismissed. It's seen as bad things, so bad knowledge rather, or useless knowledge, and yet it is very, very important. So I remember when I worked in a district clinic in Brest, one of the rural towns in Pretoria. Women in antenatal clinic as well as in child clinics. The others brought their babies with a band on the waist. And the other nurse said to me, you must tell these people to cut these things when they come to the clinic. And when I asked the mothers, why do you have bands on the wrists and on the children's waist, they said, because we do not have scales. We actually measure whether it's growing or not. So otherwise, because we come after 3 months, we wouldn't know. So that's why we've got these bands. And when they become tight, we then cut them because now we can know the baby's gaining weight, the baby's growing. So this was a very, very interesting lesson. I think that's where things changed in the way I rendered practice as a district nurse. So those little things that are taken, as things that will cause infection or infect others. Yet when you want to hear more about them and make that time, you really get rich information and you can learn good lessons from such things. So yeah, these were just my inputs. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Johanna. That's so good. And I mean, I always think of our lovely ABCD colleagues down in Australia, Fiona and Dee and Michelle, like just the idea of a setup of a room. If you're going to go and have a meeting with people in a community setting for the first time, the traditional thing is chairs like in a cinema, and then you stand in the front as the facilitator. And immediately what you're saying is, I'm in control. This is my meeting. And everyone is just going to sit and stare at you and say nothing. And Dee and Michelle, every place they go to, they will just change the furniture completely and sit in a circle. And there's nobody who is like in charge. And there's a speaking piece. So you have a piece of something or other. You put it in the middle of the circle on the floor, and anyone who wants to speak goes forward, picks up that thing and says, right, I've got the speaking piece and I'd like to say something. And it just totally changes the dynamic of you coming in there saying, I'm in charge. You know, it's a small, it feels like a small thing, but it can be make a completely different outcome. Any other questions, comments?
Teacher Janine, just to add on that, I'm actually reminded of the fact that as community development practitioners or whatever we do in our own settings, we need to reflect on our positionalities, our identities, the gender issues, because that is very important, because these are some of the issues that influence how we really execute the practice or engage with communities. So I found that this was very critical when I did my research in a Xhosa speaking community, when I'm not actually Xhosa speaking. So I actually wondered whether I was an insider or an outsider. So I had to look at how do I really learn and build trust and you know, through reflection, I really learned a lot of things from engaging with the Xhosa speaking people in a culture that I'm not really familiar with. So those things are also very, very important. And as an older woman, I think also age counted, you know, in that space, because I was really investigating a very sensitive topic on perspectives and subjective experiences of people living with epilepsy. So I think my age also was something that I had to consider. How did I ask these questions and got a good response? And then as compared to a younger one who could have maybe had difficulty in asking adult people about you know, how they experience the illness. So because I had some very, very private issues that were shared with me, and that made me wonder, you know, if it was a young researcher, how would this person have reacted to that? Yeah. So yeah, that's really just to share on that.
Thanks, Johanna. Any other comments, reflections, questions?
I want to come in with just a last comment, and I want to seem that there seems to be a little bit of silence, but it's a hilarious example of how we did not look at the negative side. I did some research for a local authority on the health facilities available, and the community members tend to sleep in the queue in front of the health, the clinic. They sleep there because 8 o'clock it opens and they want to be first in the queue and they only take the first X number of people. So what happened in the long run is that old, frail people would pay a child or a youngster to go and sleep in the queue, and then they would come in the morning and then take over, give them the money, and so forth. And the community's answer to that was, can you just please open the gate so that we could sleep on the stoop?
Yeah.
Undercover. And now I'm going to specifically talk to Roger and Bob. This is the hidden hand of the system. My report said the answer is very simple. Why do you open the clinic at 8 o'clock in the morning? If you open it at 10 o'clock, they won't have to sleep there. You try the local authority system to open the office at 10 o'clock and not 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
But then you have to close it at 6 o'clock tonight. And, you know, if you really get into the hearts and soul of this community, what they saw as the answer and their practice, the answer was very clear. It's up to this date not accepted because the system doesn't allow it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks. Sorry, I don't know how to put the hand up in Zoom. I'm not used to it.
No problem.
I need
This
to
is good
think
enough.
Yeah, that worked.
Yeah.
Joanna, I just wanted to respond to some of what you said because I found it immensely important. And I just want to ask if you got is any of your work, do you have your publications around your thinking, or you were talking about your research?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I do. It's actually on epilepsy. I've published on decolonizing research methods. I've published on the tortoise under the couch. But when I talk about issues of culture, it's because after the interview, a big tortoise just emerged from the couch on which I was sitting, appeared from there. And I could not contain myself. But I respectfully, I had to say, Mama, can I go out to answer the phone? I was so frightened because I did not, know that all the time that I was having this interview, the tortoise was actually under the couch. So
I love that.
on reflection, when I wrote about this after my research, I actually found the cultural relevance of this tortoise, the beliefs about the ancestors related to epilepsy. So I wrote this reflective piece, and it's entitled "The Tortoise Under the Couch." And yeah, so I think that's, and I'm raising issues of culture, issues of power, identity, and positionality there, which I think would be important. Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johanna. Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly respond to Yvette's observation about the people queuing. Yeah, in the context of some current work I'm doing in Ireland, I'm working with support providers for people with learning disabilities and autism, and with the health service executive, who are the funders, basically, on behalf of government, of the work they do, who essentially you've got a system which says you either need a day service, or you need a residential or a supported living service, or you need a respite service. But you can't have a service that supports your life. You've got to either fit into something that happens between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock Monday to Friday, or you're going to be separated from your family, or you are essentially, once in a while, you can be separated from your family and go off with people you don't know and spend time in an institution, whilst your family theoretically get a rest. And the system, fortunately, the people we're working with in the HSE are beginning to get it, but they don't feel as though they can change it. There is something in the system that says you can't just take the fact that people are entitled to some resource and use it in their best interest. And that's essentially the work that I'm engaged in doing. And when it gets down to it, it comes down to the real question is doing that going to be better value for money? So what we're actually being told is that the people that advise the politicians at the end of the day, and the politicians are only interested in saying to people, we've provided you with something, really just want to stay in control, and effectively can't accept that people are good. That's the fundamental.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Bob. And it makes me think of, some changes are so simple if you just have that willingness to think out of the box. It makes me think, I live in Howick, which is a town full of retirement villages. And so you get used to having to deal with elderly people who are slow, who take forever to pull off from a traffic light. And so you end up having to sit through a whole circle of green, red, and yellow. But you know that this is what people's lives are like. They are lonely. So if you start chatting to someone in the queue in the shop, you're going to end up having a long conversation. And if you're open to that, it's not a problem. But people, like you say, the system is different and the system works in a different way. And I was so happy to see the other day on a post somewhere where I think it's in the Netherlands, in the supermarkets, they have a till which is a slow till. And that's where you can go and queue and pay for your shopping. And you can have as long a conversation as you like with the lady behind the till. And you're almost encouraged to go to that queue and tell them all about your grandchildren or your flu or your flowers that came out in your garden last week, whatever it is that you need to talk about, because you're lonely, you're going home to an empty house. Go to the shops, go into the slow queue and have a chat before you take your shopping and go home. And I thought, that is so simple. If you make it clear to people, this is the slow queue. Don't come here if you're in a hurry. It's a simple solution to something which is going to be life-changing for people who are literally dying of loneliness. And we just need to think, whose life is it? Whose development is it? Whose process is it? And be willing to think differently. So kudos to Bob and team who are doing fantastic work where you are. So yeah, we've had a wonderful webinar from you.
Janine,
Mm.
if you allow me, I can make two
Yes,
comments.
please jump in. Yeah.
Maybe three. First, I want just to make a pitch for our webinar series, because we can only be this resourceful and have this kind of commentary of sharing if we have presenters. And I've put a long story there. And simply, I'm inviting all of us. We are very resourceful. We have a whole wealth of stuff that we can share and benefit the rest of our colleagues in community development practice. It is just simple. You have a topic you are very passionate about. Just let us know. We'll schedule you. This system is rolling and you have come this far, close to 50 or so webinars, just because of the graciousness of our colleagues who are willing to step up and share with us. Just get in touch. It's a topic you are passionate about and a time that is convenient for you to make the presentation. It's only that we have set a slot every second Wednesday of the month at 11 a.m. Kenyan time. You can convert to your convenient time, and then we'll be able to get us all going and sharpen each other. And then we don't have to start asking ourselves questions so many years down the line. What went wrong if we have been doing it the wrong way? And you can imagine now the misfortune of so many communities that we work with, who again will have, unfortunately, in some cases inadvertently, led down the wrong path. My interventions, I think as we talk about what goes wrong, our assumptions, because most of the time as we go to communities, we have a whole package of assumptions about the communities that we are working with. And most of the time we step into a ship that is already moving. And I want to give an example. Debate has talked about the whole issue of formal education and all that. And in community development, at times we're asking community members to keep a lot of records. And I want to share an example. A few years back, we were doing a project with supporting community health workers who are volunteers in communities within our community health strategy. They are in charge of a number of households and they do routine monitoring of health parameters, and they have to report now to make referral to the nearest health facility. Well, our project was just to build their capacity. They'd already been selected, they're already working. And so we went, trained them, and then we led them down the path of now doing monitoring. When eventually, in the middle of the project, there was so much huge bundles of records that they needed to keep for the Ministry of Education for free. It's a voluntary kind of assignment. And of course, we had also a set of records for them to keep for us. Mainstream, we came to realize that we had quite a number of community health volunteers who did not have the capacity to complete the records that they were supposed to complete. And so they were getting their colleagues to complete for them. And that already was quite a big problem, because then the question was, all these records they have been keeping, and that's the data the Ministry of Health is relying on to make quite significant interventions in the community. They are being filled by people who, after talking with the communities, they have to go and tell their colleagues, this is what I found, this is what I was told by this household, and so can we fill this data? Because they also don't want to acknowledge to the households that they are monitoring that they don't know how to do record keeping. So they have to pick information and carry it and share it elsewhere. Of course, the whole issue of now loss of data across in the whole process becomes significant, because then that renders the question of accuracy of the records then that we have to rely on to make decisions. And it was quite embarrassing for us because now at the end of the day, now we have to give them people now to support them, to collect data, to fill the forms, and that we are now to go into a whole process of explaining so that then they don't get into quote unquote shame that actually they don't know how to read and write. We have to make it acceptable that this is where we are, and then now we have to get on track. Our assumptions can lead us down the wrong path, and ultimately we end up with wrong data, wrong information, wrong interventions. The second contribution I would want to make with regard to this topic is the whole issue of asymmetry of information. As we work with communities, there is a whole body of knowledge, body of information that we have, and there is what the community knows. And most of the time, we might assume that we have given all the information at the inception of the project. But working with a project, and it was also another plan, unfortunately, it was also a planned international project, where ultimately we were doing at the end of the cycle, and there the communities were being called for meetings every other day, every other week. And we have this training, we have this meeting, we have. So what the question was, right from the start, why didn't you tell us we have this amount of money which need to be spent over the year, so that then we can plan accordingly? Because ultimately, the officers of implementing the project realized that now they had so much money which they needed to burn before the closure of the financial year. And this information was not available to the community, so that then they could plan how to use the money and or to schedule whatever meetings. And that in itself now meant the communities had to stop, were all quote unquote being forced now to stop all that they are doing so that they can be available for this organization, so that the officers can burn their money. Asymmetry of information then becomes a problem, and ultimately can also lead to a process where communities say, look, if you don't want to trust us with information, then you can keep your information, you can also keep your money. We are doing fine where we are. And that comes into what I think Janine is talking about. Communities now need to start inviting people to tell them, look, if you are ready to work with us in our terms, then come, then we can work. Because we are getting to a process where the community was being called for meetings every week, and they still have other development partners, they are also demanding their time, including government agencies demanding their time. And the communities also have a life to live. So thank you, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Daniel. And I think just to echo Daniel's call, I think maybe this is a kind of a topic that we could even do a part 2 on it, because I think it's just opened up so many thoughts and so many ideas. So perhaps if anyone wants to offer to give some more thought to this and present something more on this, that's certainly something that we could look at going forward. We're just about on the half hour, so our time is up, but I just want to say a very special thank you to Devet for putting so much thought and ideas and passion into the presentation. Thank you so much. And yeah, just keep an eye out for the next, we don't have a topic confirmed yet for September, but you'll be able to keep an eye on our social media platforms and see what the next one is. And if you have any ideas, as Daniel says, please do get in touch with Jessica. She put her email there, membership@iacdglobal.org, and then we can set up a webinar on your topic. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. It's lovely to have had such a wonderful range of people right across the globe. So enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everybody, and take care.
Thanks so much, Janine, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Devet.